And we're live. Welcome back to the Saving Democracy live stream. I'm Etienne Lebel, and today we will continue on our intellectual adventure into Canada's democracy's health. And so a quick overview, as can be seen in the topics to be covered panel. We will first start with an Emergency Act inquiry update and recap, and then potentially some spontaneous commentary on the Public Inquiry Act, which is now on day 6. And then we'll jump into a new organization of Canada's vital organs. So you can consider Canada's democracy has many, many different aspects. But there are vital aspects, kind of like your body has vital organs. And so I've come up with a way to better organize these critical aspects so that we can focus our discussion a bit more. And I have a rough draft to show. Then we will go into a deep dive, number 1, related to COVID vaccine safety, which we started last time. And then we'll have some spontaneous commentary on other current events. Excuse me. And then briefly some fan mail is trickling in, so we can check in on excuse me, some interesting sometimes comedic fan mail. And so I've made a few adjustments, hopefully it'll be a bit smoother in terms of the technicals, like switching over. So we could just put the website. Again, everything is organized on their centralized website, savingdemocracy.ca, which shows you, it embeds all of our former live streams, gives you a bit about the initiative and the strong ethical principles that I'm abiding by, and if I'm violating any of them, feel free to call me out on it and we will discuss it. So the live stream is over here. Oh, they're having a break. Okay, well, let's go back here. Well, we can leave it there. Actually, we can see. So the high-level brief recap is, I guess, just a lot of the same. We have no legal or moral evidence presented for there being any kind of emergency that would satisfy the criteria, excuse me, in terms of the safety, national security, safety of politicians, and so yesterday we had, I believe, Diane Deans and Kim Ayat. Let's see here. So one thing to comment on was how the different witnesses seem to be describing completely different realities of what was actually going on during the Freedom Convoy protests. Which, again, full disclosure, I was there regularly during the 3 weeks for long periods of time. I mean, I was there as a curious onlooker, as a citizen journalist, but also as just as an individual. Because at the time, there had been a lot of lockdowns, isolation, and it was quite special, and it was quite inspiring. And indeed, I had several of my other contacts go to the Freedom Convoy, together with me or separately. And that was the common theme. I was like, wow, this is even more inspiring and socially enjoyable than a typical Canada Day celebration on Parliament Hill. And one person even, he said it drew a tear to his eye, and I can relate to that because I felt a bit emotional being there, and just again the diversity of people there, coming from all walks of life, concern about many different things, and diversity, like true diversity, viewpoint diversity, political diversity, ethnic diversity. If anything, I think it was more diverse than a typical Canada Day crowd. And so now you contrast that with the witness testimony by Zexi Lee and the other lady, is it? Oh yeah, Victoria de la Ronde. And it's just really hard to square the circles here, because if you listen to their testimony, and this is under oath, the question becomes, how can it be that these different witnesses seem to be describing completely different realities? Whereby these protesters are, they're talking about like a nightmare situation, and they were feeling threatened, and they were feeling like it was a dangerous environment. You had all these truckers with big beards telling them to smile more, and the fireworks and the gas fumes and the honking. And of course, there's many different things that could contribute to this kind of divide. And indeed, I'd say society's probably never been this divided. And so, just very briefly, we'll come back to these themes. But one of the major contributors, I think, is what could be considered the culture wars or the radical woke ideology, which has infiltrated most public institutions in Canada. And I saw that firsthand in the university systems. Actually, we saw it getting worse and worse in terms of political correctness, and thinking, where was this coming from? But it seems to be that there's more and more things we're not allowed to discuss, or we're getting in trouble for discussing. And this is a university. We should be the last place where they could control and try to censor and control speech. But in any event, the proposition is that there is this kind of invisible ideological forces that is affecting people's ability to perceive events. And that's why you're getting these descriptions of events that are so different and in contradiction. And it's contributing to this, what we talked about, the first stream, twisting language, right? So when they talk about microaggressions and social violence and activations, right? These are terms that are coming out of the elite class, the laptop class. If you describe those terms to a blue-collar worker, working HVAC or working in construction, they would look at you like you're from a different planet, right? And so my insight, or my opinion is that those ideological forces are contributing to this divide, and it's very pernicious. It's very concerning because, again, this has infiltrated universities, which are upstream from culture and politics, and including the legal system. And so it's and of course the state subsidized media, which also have been infiltrated, and they're giving you the news, right? So it's really a cycle that's been going on for a while. And again, this is why these fundamental categories like freedom of expression, freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and freedom of speech are so crucial. And that's what we'll see in this new diagram, this new organization of these key stories, key developments. It's really crucial to consider the fundamentality of these categories, because everything else is built upon them. A free democratic society is built upon these fundamental principles, where individual rights are supreme to group rights, for example. And this radical woke ideology is focused on the group rather than the individual. And the group is supreme over the individual, which is why some people call it neo-Marxist. But I think it's a kind of a variant. It's an Omicron variant of neo-Marxism. But either way, that's one comment about the public inquiry. Another thing that was interesting yesterday, when they were interviewing or cross-examining Diane Deans, City of Ottawa councillor, looks like she's responsible for the interfacing of the Ottawa Police with the City of Ottawa. And what came out is there was a lot of internal conflict going on behind the scenes, and a lot of this kind of childish stuff. Of course, everyone's stressed. It's a very stressful, tense situation. But that's part of your job. I mean, if you're going to be city councillor or city mayor or chief of police, I mean, you're signing up for big time stress. So, yeah, the Freedom Convoy protests were unprecedented. But, I mean, the COVID lockdowns going on for years and years is also very stressful. So emotions are running high on all sides. But what was interesting is that all this internal fighting among the mayor, city councillors, the Ottawa Police, and then the Ottawa Police chief resigning or being forced to resign, a lot of things coming out about that. And then combined with the fact that what's coming out is a lot of city councillors were actually demanding more boots on the ground, more police reinforcement before the Emergencies Act was invoked, but they were not satisfying their requests. And some of these city councillors were really upset. I mean, they've reviewed emails and text messages where the city councillor is accusing the OPS, the Interior Police Service, and the PP, the Parliamentary Police Service. They're accusing them of lying about making progress on their requests for more. So this is really serious, and so it opens up the possibility. Again, we need to explain these mysteries. So it opens up the possibility that the government higher up wanted things to escalate so that when they invoked the Emergencies Act, it would seem a bit more justified. Right? And again, we'll see. It's a tantalizing possibility, but that would be pretty damning for the government, right? If the provincial government, the city councillors are demanding more police reinforcement to control the protest before it escalates, but they were not doing that. They were not allowing that, right? So that's some higher level summary. And so today is day 6, and they are, I guess, we'll be focusing on Pat Morris from the Ontario Police Service, and Patricia Ferguson from the Ottawa Police Service. let's listen
involving the
briefly.
chief, you and I believe perhaps Deputy Chief Bell as well. I want to show you the document OPS 3014479. So this is perhaps your notes.
Okay.
I know it's page 66 of the electronic record. So do you see at around 7:10 a.m., there was a reference to the chief briefing the team?
Yes.
And at the top, Mission Hydra. Does that ring a bell?
Yes, it does.
Tell us what that means.
I wasn't familiar with what Hydra was. I guess it's a mythological Greek figure. But he spoke about it, this thing having many heads. And so, we needed to, as I wrote here, cut off and cauterize the heads. So as we were able to take control of a situation, then we held that position. I think that's what he was referring to as cauterizing. It was a term that I've not used in event planning before.
So just to help us understand, what did you understand the many heads to be an analogy of?
So I think this was his 7 points strategy. And I think each of them was one of the means that we would be able to use to bring this to an end.
I see. Carry on.
Okay. So he had called us all in there, I think in response to the meeting of the night before and my assessment of things that I don't know that he necessarily agreed with, or I might not have instilled the confidence that he was hoping to hear. So he set out to all of us to meet and then to actually
And now we can
put this
turn
plan
to a
into
few
some
other
form of a visual documentation, which you saw. That was one of our
live stream coverage of the live stream by Jason Levine. Again, one of the few independent journalists that seems to be authentic and independent and free of conflicts of interest. And he generally provides a bit more commentary, and he watches every single minute. So he'll say it was a legal, peaceful process. They had no laws against it and could not do anything. So they had to lie to the public to get support, to get boots on the ground. They wanted to go in and thump people, and they did. Just close your eyes and think about Pat Morris. It works for me. Justice is happening, and Craig Abrams, director, OPP, is next. I suspect it will be more fighting back with truth. In my opinion, I think they wanted the people to fight back so they can give their January 6th and justify all the same things that the U.S. is doing to shut down opposition to global liberal government. And so on. Okay, and then this other one seems... He's a bit more comical, though seems a bit on the right side. Oops. So this is war campaign. 1,300 people watching. Our plan was graphic design and Hydra memes. And he's good at typing and bringing up images and doing some quick photoshopping.
and I think
Maybe
we
that's
dropped the Hydra. I don't think that was necessarily a plan name we wanted to go with. So I think this is what replaced that.
Okay, so are you able to confirm then that this is the plan that the former chief wanted, that the one that he spoke to you about on that morning at 7:10?
I believe so. If we could just scroll up beyond maybe the first page or two.
Hydra 3.0.
Yes, that looks to be correct.
Okay. Now, if we can go to page 6, I believe that's where the mission statement is. this is a shorter mission statement compared to the strategic concepts of operations, a document that you had provided the day before. And this one simply says to end the unlawful elements of the Ottawa truck demonstration and restore safe and open neighborhoods and businesses. There's no reference to the engagement process or to PLT. Tell us about any discussions you may have had with the chief on that point.
So coming from the world that I had before my experience as
Oh,
an
dear.
incident commander, when we are engaging in any event.
Well, the other comment I had about some of the
intent or mission of
witness
what we are trying to achieve.
testimony.
And it always begins with, my training has indicated, it always begins with to safely negotiate the unlawful elements of the, and carry on. And you start with that, really focus on negotiation as a starting point. I think my recollection.
Yeah, like
of
talking to the
was he and
protesters
I,
and seeing
had
what
some-
their requests were. What are the demands to discuss with Trudeau and other elected officials about their grievances in a peaceful way, civilized way. So again, that's the elephant in the room. And maybe we won't get a clear answer on why Trudeau was so afraid to engage with the protesters when he's very, very excited to meet other kinds of protesters which fit this radical woke ideology I was talking about. So Black Lives Matter and Antifa type groups. And again, this is just standard reading. This is not wild conjectures. And as part of my 10 hours of Saving Science show, where I cover how this has infiltrated academia, how it's infiltrated even the granting agencies, the funding agencies. So in Canada, if you want a grant to do research on biology or even medicine, the most, even in physics and math, you need to pretend that you care about these radical diversity, equity, and inclusion political principles, right? But again, these funding agencies should be politically neutral, but gradually over time they've infiltrated, and it's it's just do your job. Don't rock the boat too much. And myself and others, and of course now Jordan Pearson. He in large part was one of the first. I was vocal before him, but I not very well as well known. But in 2015, one of the first entrees to the public and arena was against University of Toronto's anti-bias training, which he correctly identified as based on completely flawed research. And it's just completely childish, demeaning. I had to go through it in my professorship position in New Jersey. But again, most people are just, okay, you finally got your professor job. Don't rock the boat. Don't push back. But to me, I fight for principles. I fight for fundamental principles, and I need to respect fundamental Enlightenment values and other ethical principles. And if you're not allowing me to meet those principles, then I'm going to dig down into it and I'm going to figure out what's going on. And this is one of my strengths. A lot of people, doing a live stream like this is a lot of work with a very low chance of actually having sufficient impact to justify the costs and the time. But my response is I have, like we reviewed last time, several unique background and technical skill set, but beyond that, my personality is one of being really obsessed with principles and really determined and not giving up, no matter what, because these principles are important, and the more we start violating these fundamental principles, the more we're going to be straying from the path as a society, as a free and democratic society, one of the few remaining in the world, and one of the few that exists. But we need to protect it and strengthen it if we want it to survive. Okay, I think I've had enough.
Arguments, I will say. We had a discussion, we had a disagreement on.
Oh, there's
on
comments.
that, and ultimately, he said it was understood that we were going to be negotiating, and he did not want it to be in the mission
Far
statement. So
right
his mission
BS.
statement is what was
Oh, well,
written,
let's
yeah.
go.
Right. So I want to go back
Where
down
is
to
this?
the
Garmar.
OPS
If you
14479,
would like,
page 66, because there's some
if you'd like to elaborate,
ask you to clarify.
so what do you, it was organized by an anti-democracy white supremacist group. They wanted to occupy our parliament building and force our federal government to dissolve. Some wish death upon our prime minister. Okay, well, those are some very bold claims. Do you have evidence for that?
Do you see
So, and it's interesting.
at 720, Chief laid out his plan.
Okay, let's
Permitted negotiation. And when I brought it up, he reacted
actually.
saying we're not negotiating.
Okay, this is great. Welcome, Garmar.
It's better that you read it.
Not sure who you are, but I will respond nonetheless. So he or she is referring to claims that the Freedom Convoy.
And that was at 7:10 a.m.
Okay, well, right at anti-democracy, the,
9:15 a.m.
that
there
that's
was a
not
meeting,
standing.
with the Chief had with you.
No, they wanted
Chief fell.
their main demand was
Page 67.
that the government end all COVID
That's okay.
mandates, which again are argued to be unjustified based on the evidence, but potentially worse, it might even be illegal, as we were going to review today, in terms of violating the Nuremberg Code. Coercing medical treatment is a very, very serious medical ethics violation. And the white supremacist group, he may be referring to Pat King. So Pat King, one of the co-organizers of, we'll just mute that. He has been known to say strange things, which had made me suspicious. So he has discussed white replacement theory, which is the idea that the globalists or the powers that be are somehow trying to spread non-white races into countries that are predominantly white, so that it creates chaos and again I disagree with that, but if that's your opinion, you should debate them on that, right? And say, well, I right. So again, you can't just assume, oh, that sounds white supremacist, so we're just going to call them white supremacists as a way to dismiss them. And actually, this relates to what I was just talking about in terms of how the witnesses at the public inquiry seem to be describing completely different realities, right? Because if you start saying like, well, there was a couple Confederate flags out of 3,000 people, so we're just going to assume that the vast majority of Freedom Convoy people are white supremacists. No, that is wrong. It cannot be further from the truth. CBC spread some of those lies. And the claim that the Freedom Convoy wanted to dissolve government, that's completely baseless. And again, if you can prove me wrong, that'd be great. But I've not seen any credible claims or evidence that the Freedom Convoy wanted to dissolve government. And again, in a group of 100 people, maybe someone alluded to that. Some wish death upon our Prime Minister. Again, death threats are already part of the criminal code, okay? So if there was reliable, credible evidence that some of the Freedom Convoy people were wishing death upon Justin Trudeau, I'm pretty sure the RCMP would be investigating. Okay? Death threats are already part of the criminal code, just like parking violations and open fires downtown. So they could have controlled the situation much sooner. And instead their defense is, oh, it was the red zone, so we weren't allowing bylaw to do their job because it was so dangerous. It was the red zone. What is the red zone? Okay, police and bylaw officers are trained to be in volatile, dangerous situations. Okay, and it's your job to do your job. So again, there should be investigations. Why were the bylaw and Ottawa police following orders that don't make sense? And they should be reprimanded. And so, again, all that you probably could find is people alluding to the fact that Trudeau is breaking the law with regard to mandatory COVID vaccines. And that's a fair claim, whether it's true or not. We need to investigate. Again, due process. So I think the evidence is growing and very damning. But I still believe in due process. And due process includes presumed innocence. And so Trudeau, it should be, Trudeau is assumed to be innocent until proven guilty. And it's very complex. So you need very well-organized legal case. And that's what we'll review. We'll review the evidence that we have, the evidence that we're preparing. But again, you due process applies to everyone, whether you're the Prime Minister or a protester. So all protesters should be assumed to be innocent until proven guilty. And that relates to how they've unfairly lumped in the freedom protest at Parliament Hill with these other blockades that were happening in Windsor, Ontario, and in Coutts, Alberta, which were very different animals. And they were completely different, involving different people. And so lumping these in is unfair. But that might be their strategy, is that because they allegedly found a bunch of brand new looking guns and military equipment in Coutts, they want to make an association in your mind between illegal blockades with where they found these guns. So again, there's a lot of question marks as to the veracity and authenticity of those weapons. But they want to create an association between that and the peaceful protests at Parliament Hill involving the Freedom Convoy. So Garmar might be gone, but if you have any follow-ups, feel free to comment. But I appreciate your comments. We can respectfully disagree, and hopefully we can focus on the issues and not just call each other names. Okay, so
with the group again that day. And I believe that meeting took place at 12:10 p.m. Am I right?
Yes, that sounds right.
So if I could take you back to your notes now, OPS 3014454 at page 136. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not your notes. It's the same document. I apologize. So we just go down a few pages to page 138. If we go down.
So this is an example where war campaign, and again, people want to
I want to ask you about this.
Use humor and try to lighten the mood.
We're now
but
at the
he sees a bit
integrated planning group.
going a bit far.
And the chief asked this.
And I mean, I appreciate dark humor, but not everyone
we can
does.
Add the information.
He's saying Ottawa, of course, is Ratawa or Twatawa.
We haven't agreed not to proceed with our plan for tonight.
She's funniest to me because with a straight face, she talks about their Operation Hydra.
This?
Yes.
What was that about?
That was the plan for an action zone at Rideau and Sussex. that Superintendent Patterson had proposed and was working towards executing.
Okay. Tell us about Rideau Sussex. The Commission has heard some evidence about why that intersection might be problematic.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can we just establish the date of this meeting, please?
It is February the 9th.
Cobra Commander. Oh, and he's copy and pasting comments.
around
Right? He's
12
getting
p.m.
so many comments. So he's
So Rideau and
kitty
Sussex,
corner cops game.
from the
That
start
was another comments
of
yesterday.
the arrival
Some
of
of these
the
city
convoy,
officials
was a contentious
so-
and volatile, describe it,
How to say this
intersection.
politely? But they even admit, well, I'm
the
really
people
bad with
there, the
technology.
protesters or the people
Oh,
who
this is
were
another
there
thing.
were,
I forgot to mention yesterday. It was City Councillor Diane Deans, and she was caught secretly recording a conversation between her and Jim Watson. Apparently, because there was so much conflict that she felt she might get fired by a non-confidence vote, and so she thought it'd be good to secretly record her call for later for her own career benefits. But she claims to value openness and transparency. And she literally said, well, doesn't that violate openness and transparency? When you were on a call with Microsoft Teams, you could have recorded the call normally, where it warns people that they're being recorded. But instead, you just secretly recorded the call with your iPhone. And worst, she didn't disclose that evidence to the Commission until the morning of her appearance, because her alibi is that while she was listening to Jim Watson testify, she realized, oops, we have this secret recording that actually sheds light on what happened. So then she realized, oops, I need to submit that. Excuse me. So yeah, this again, there seems to be a pattern between Serge Arpin and the other city councillor who's saying, say it in French, say it in French. They seem to be a bit sloppy with their ethics and a bit kind of sophomoric would be a polite way of saying it, in terms of like, well, you know, we had this meeting and I texted him with my iPhone and we had this text conversation. I mean, you're having, of course you're going to need to text using some kind of phone, but in this, for these emergencies, for this really important. Anyways, it just seemed a bit childish and kind of Sesame Street. Oh yeah, they were saying Sesame Street operation. Okay, so I think that's enough for now. We can tune back in. So we can check this off. So now we'll dive into this new organization, and it looks very messy, but it's better than nothing. So again, the title or the broader focus today is on assessing the health of Canada's democracy's vital organs. So you think of a human body, and you say, well, or let's take me for example. You could say, well, am I healthy? What's my state of health, right? And there's 1,000 different ways that you could look at my health in terms of all of the different organs and different aspects of my bodily health and mental, I guess. But there are key categories that are more important to consider. So, for example, my heart, my lungs, my brain, all my vital organs like my liver, pancreas, right? And so if you want a good sense of my health, you should first focus on the vital organs instead of just trying to cover everything. And so it's a bit like the current situation in terms of Canada's democracy's health, right? I mean, I could run around, there's thousands, if not more, stories and scandals and developments. But what are the crucial categories, right? What are the crucial categories? So again, bear with me here. This is very, very messy. Yeah, these comments are not, I should, I could say something here. Responded, can you provide credible evidence for these bold claims? Responded and commented during stream. Okay, so this is very messy, but I will we'll go through it. And so I've divided it in terms of 6. Hopefully you can see my cursor. So I've divided it and organized it in a sensible way. I mean, another way of thinking about it is that you can start by looking at the Constitution, which is all just verbal text. But here I'm trying to organize it visually. So when you look at all the fundamental rights, and there's another way I thought this morning, you could organize this in terms of more like the democratic safeguards. What are the vital democratic safeguards? In terms of Parliament, in terms of the Senate, in terms of all this boring transparency stuff, which, we should, and maybe we'll get to that. But this one, I think, is more effective for now, because these are categories of everyday people. Again, everyday people just want to enjoy their life and a meaningful life. So these categories make sense in terms of the everyday person, right? And with the most fundamental, bodily autonomy. It's your body. You decide what to do with it. As long as you're not harming other people, it's your life, it's your body. And this is the sanctity of life, the dignity of your body, right? And this is covered in Section 7 of the Constitution, which I should readily have. Here's a PDF, right? And so the Canadian Charter is divided in all these sections up to Section 34. But I'm trying to organize, because this is just pretty disorganized. You have these fundamental freedoms in Section 2, but then it's a bit messy. So this is just a way to organize it in terms of the psychology of life. That, okay, you have bodily autonomy over what happens to your body, and then you have sovereignty in terms of freedom of speech. So what you do with your body. You need vocal cords, you need a voice, your physical voice, and you need the freedom of thought, freedom of belief, freedom of opinion, and then you have the freedom to express those opinions. And in any way you want, whether it's just with a sign on a bicycle or through audio, video, right? And so freedom of expression is the broader category, whereas freedom of speech is the vocal category, right? I mean, it's the most common, I guess, way of expressing yourself. And I would surmise that these are the two most fundamental categories: bodily autonomy and freedom of speech, freedom of expression. And then, so still in the individual realm, you have these legal rights, democratic rights, equality rights, kind of bit more boring stuff. But these compose the individual, your individual freedoms, which makes life enjoyable. And then you move on to interpersonal geographical, which is the freedom to be social, Because once you have, oh, and just to finish, the reason these are the most fundamental is because without bodily autonomy, without health, and without freedom of expression, then you can't participate in all these other things, right? If you don't have your health, then you can't express yourself physically, you can't vote, you can't participate in the democratic process. And of course, without your own health and individual rights, you can't decide whether you want to associate with other people, join a trade, join a group, join a church, right? And so that's freedom of assembly and freedom of association are kind of the most fundamental interpersonal rights. You can consider those interpersonal and then geographical, like freedom of mobility, because then if you are healthy, then you can travel the world. You can travel Canada. You can travel all wherever you want. Again, as long as you're not violating laws and harming other people, you can do what you want. And then the last category is life, liberty, and security, which is kind of a strange miscellaneous category. But and again, to me it's way too ambiguous what they mean by life, liberty, and security. Some consider gainful living, so being able to provide for your family, right? Which you could call kind of freedom of commerce. And so this, so the idea here is, again, you organize the six kind of democracy's six most fundamental vital organs, which not just allows you to enjoy your life as you see fit, but allows you to hold the government accountable, right? Under mostly these two categories. So you have freedom of expression and speech, and you have democratic rights and legal rights to participate to the extent you want in the democratic process. And that includes speaking to your member of parliament and bringing up issues like I had tried to do and it failed, violently failed. And again, I'm not, I am just another person, but given my scientific background and my published author status and all these other small accomplishments, you would think that they would listen a little bit more. And we can review my hundreds and hundreds of emails across the last 2 years. And the non-responses or the pathetic responses that I receive from these elected members of parliament who are supposed to be representing their constituents. And this includes even people like Pierre Poilievre, which is a sneak preview, is that I believe he is not acting in the best interests of the Canadian people. And there's different theories as to, well, whose interests are he serving if he's not serving the interests of the Canadian people. We'll get to that. But he has a pretty face, and he's very articulate, and he is very charismatic. So he has a lot of good traits going for him. But again, does he have ethics? Does he have strong ethical principles? And can we trust them? So with this kind of new structure, I can then organize the different stories that we'll be following and tracking. And again, the idea is that we need deep dives. So these, and maybe I'm forgetting, one thing I think I'm missing here. Let me know if I am missing. I think the only one, there's freedom of press. Freedom of the press would fall in this one, which is another crucial category that seems to be compromised. But again, there could be other things missing, or it could be improved in other ways beyond just the messiness. And this we'll have next time an official diagram, and even maybe make it hyperlinked. So then you can organize the stories, and you can see that for some of the stories, there'll be active investigative journalism to really try to drill down and really get traction on, okay, why is Health Canada not responding to my strong evidence of safety signals with the COVID vaccine, right? And if they're not going to respond, then I'm going to file an ethics complaint. And if they're not going to respond to the ethics complaint, I'll file an appeal, and so on. So those And of course, we don't have many resources, but I've decided to chase 2 or 3. So beyond that, the mandatory COVID vaccination for employment and participation in society, it's such a gross violation of medical ethics and just completely different. I mean, so for example, the lockdowns, the first year, that was already bad, pretty bad, right? But it was still, it's just kind of normal democracy not functioning well, or is this a new animal? And again, as a careful thinker, as a careful intellectual, you want to entertain different possibilities. You want to give the benefit of the doubt to people, but eventually, when they got on the COVID vaccine train, then it kind of escalated, and then it became a new low for Canadian democracy when they started the COVID vaccine rollout for, again, a virus that appears to be insufficiently dangerous for the vast majority of people. But then when they started talking about mandatory COVID vaccines, well, that's that's raising the bar quite high, and it's a different animal. So, and then the other active story is going to be the freezing of bank accounts and justifications for the Emergencies Act, which is ongoing right now, of course. Though I haven't heard anything about freezing of bank accounts, right? Because that's to me one of the most pressing issues. Because if you're afraid to speak out against the government for fear that they will freeze your bank account, I mean, this has never been seen in the history of Canada, right? And it did have a chilling effect, full disclosure, on even my own. So I was very vocal with my science watchdog work, my science whistleblower work, though I burnt so many bridges. And then I was vocal on Twitter, and then I got into some COVID skepticism, and I was very vocal. But then when it started with the COVID vaccines, and I started connecting the dots, I did get more quiet. And then after the freezing of bank accounts, I decided, well, this is getting really out of hand. And I don't have that many personal savings, but they are important, right? And so under this category, we also have justifications for these new hate speech laws, Bill C-36, Bill C-229, and justifications for new social media regulation, that they want to regulate even independent streams like this. And again, my reasoning for organizing it this way is that, because again, if you have, excuse me, you have some problems with democracy here and there. You kind of you have a scratch here, and you're bleeding in your leg over there, right? But if it's just kind of isolated problems in non-fundamental categories, that would be less serious than saying, oh, there's actually problems in each and every of the 7 fundamental democratic categories here. Again, these are the 7 most fundamental individual rights categories that make life worth living, that make life meaningful. And if there are these serious developments and what you could call authoritarian flavored developments in each and every one of these categories, then this is a lot more serious, right? Than if it's just an isolated problem over here, an isolated problem over here, right? And then worse than that, if these are happening in virtually all other Western democracies, right, then it's even more concerning. And again, I'm anti-alarmist. I really don't want to be alarmist. I try to bend over backwards to avoid alarmism and sensationalism, even though it does get you clicks. but at the same time, by carefully looking at the situation, logically, again, if you have these authoritarian flavor developments happening in each fundamental democratic category, and this is also happening in virtually all other Western democracies, right, then that's a lot more serious. So again, I don't know, this might be hard to fathom for many people, but if it might be true, if it's likely to be true, then it has to be considered, right? And again, but at the same time, this is why I want to try to keep things lighthearted, use humor, use music. Actually, good news, I actually connected my keyboard to the setup. So now I can actually play piano while live streaming. And the idea is I could play soothing classical music while listening to the boring Emergencies Act inquiry live stream. Right? And that could be quite unique. Okay, so any other questions on this kind of new structure that should help us organize our discussions, help us focus on, again, the most critical developments. And so when it says active, yeah, I guess I could have done that. When it says active, it means I'm actively investigating and I'm going to try to drill down and just throw everything at the problem in terms of letters, lawyer-enhanced letters and ethics violation claims, and eventually even submitting to the police. And if it doesn't say active, it's just that we're tracking. So these other stories, we're going to track the story closely, more closely than other stories. Because again, we can't cover everything, but we're going to closely track these other stories. And then, of course, we'll also just do spontaneous commentary on other stories as they come up. But we can't chase too many rabbits. Yeah. So of course, yeah, the second and fourth category, the developments are related. So of course, restrictions on peaceful protests and freezing of bank accounts, in this case, are overlapping. And then for freedom of mobility, of course, you have justifications for these travel restrictions, whether interprovincial travel and international travel. And finally, yeah, business closures, school closures, gym, restaurants. The healthcare crisis fits under here, though I guess another point of feedback I'm looking for is that section bodily autonomy and life, liberty, and security are both under section 7 of the charter. But again, because bodily autonomy to me is really more fundamental, I've separated that, but maybe these could be joined. And that includes the health care crisis, because again, if you don't have your health, then you don't have anything else. And there are claims that the quality of care is decreasing over time. Even though they're investing more and more money into healthcare, somehow the quality of care is still going down. So that's a mystery. Ooh, actually, I want to make that an active. Yeah, no, this one is so important, and applies to everyone. So even if you say, well, I'm not interested in politics. Well, okay, you might not be interested in politics, but you're clearly are going to be interested in knowing about how we can strengthen our healthcare system. And the other claim is that and I've seen lots of evidence, is that increased emergency room wait times with horror stories. I mean, like, the emergency room wait times have always been bad, and then they've been tracking this for decades. But these are new lows where you're talking about like 8, 10, 12-hour waits. And or even just the ERs close all weekend. There's these small towns where apparently they're just lacking resources. So okay, let's just shut down the ER the whole weekend. But again, this has never happened. And we've always had problems with healthcare and problems with limited resources. So it's unprecedented, and the one mystery that we need to get into is why has the environment in healthcare, why is it so toxic? And when you talk to people, to all these nurses that are quitting and have quit, even doctors quitting, surgeons quitting, they would say it's a very, very toxic environment. There's where you're not, where people don't feel comfortable speaking their minds. And then the forced vaccination, of course, is probably implicated. So let's again have honest, open discussions about what's going on and why are there so many people quitting. Delayed surgeries due to COVID, and then gun control legislation also fits under the security part, because you have the right to be secure. And on that point, there's a controversial point where Trudeau is saying, under the Constitution, we don't have the legal right to use a gun to defend ourselves. That guns in Canada are only for hunting and practice shooting, target shooting. But that seems weird, because politicians definitely have people with guns protecting them. And of course, they are and should be, well, no, I mean, I support nonviolence, but, I can see how these elected officials need to be protected. But again, they even though they have more responsibility, every life is equal in front of the law, right? And so if he's benefiting from security guards with guns to ensure his life, liberty, and security, then other individuals should also have that right. Law-abiding, mentally stable individuals. Okay, so that's the new chart, 7 categories. And again, let me know if you have any questions or thoughts on how to improve. So moving on, and check back here, see if there's anything
each of the
more
units that were needed to be involved, that were in an incident command structure, had a spot at the table, and that could have been an OPP officer, it could have been an RCMP officer, it could have been Ottawa Police.
Right. So I understand from
let me send a quick
interviewing
email.
Superintendent Bernier that a plan that he worked on with the integrated planning group was signed off as between him and the other members of the group. But it appears there might be some confusion around that time just as to what extent additional review or approval may or may not have been required from strategic level commanders, including yourself or the former chief. So I want to take you to an email change and see if you can help us clarify some of those confusion. Could we call up document OPP 401547, please? So if we go down to the very bottom, to the beginning of the email chain, so Deputy Chief, you see that this email began with the former chief sending you an email. Is a request. He said, please send me the latest version of the operations plan that I approved on Wednesday, February the 9th. Now, which operations plan did you understand him to be referring to?
I believe this was the 3.0.
The 3.0. And then he also asked, also please advise if the plan has received all official approvals, signatures, etc., as there seems to be some concerns about this from the RCMP. Tell us about this.
So I'm not sure if this was at the chief's level, whether it was Commissioner Lucky or where the concerns were coming from within the RCMP. But we did have Chief Superintendent or Superintendent Phil Liu from the RCMP involved in our plan at that point in time. I do know that in Ottawa, there's the national policing side, and then there is the operational policing side for the RCMP, and so I don't know if there was a disconnect there in terms of that communication. But Superintendent Liu had been working on the plan. The plan was moving forward and had been built out from what we had supplied of the 3.0. That's what they had been working on from that date forward, from the 9th of February to the 13th on these plans. And Superintendent Bernier was receiving these plans, reviewing them, and then approving them.
So in this one email, he seems to be referring to two different plans.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we go further up, we see your reply at 5:58. Now, by the way, in between the request and your reply, did you speak to anyone that you remember?
I don't recall.
Okay, so let's take a look at your reply. Good evening, Chief. In checking with Rob Bernier, he finally had a chance to review the plan from the integrated planning team and has sent it back with his comments. He would prefer that it be completed and signed off, and will then share the plan as he is the final approver of it. As for 3.0, Ottawa Truck Demo 22, February 9th, 22, it looks like you attach that 3.0 plan. So were you responding to both requests and trying to, I'll let you tell us what you were trying to do.
It would appear I'm talking about two different plans. And I don't believe I had seen the integrated plan, not before Superintendent Bernier had signed off on that. So I think what I'm saying is he's had a chance to review the plans. It's a large document, lots of pages involved in details, and Superintendent Bernier wanted to go over all of them. And he's obviously done a first review and sent it back with his comments to the people who were developing the plan. And he's saying he would prefer that he's had a chance to really make sure that it is tight and he's happy with it before sharing the plan. And as he is the final approver, and I was making that point to say that it is up to him to approve the plan.
Up to?
Up to Superintendent Bernier to approve the plan.
Okay. You said in checking with Rob Bernier. Does that refresh your memory?
Yeah, so I suspect I had a conversation with him, probably over the phone, about where things were at and what was going on.
Okay. So if we go further up, this is the former chief replying to your response. He said, thank you for the clarification. I was not aware of this delay as I had approved the plan last Wednesday.
Okay.
Now, this is February 13th.
Try to share the link.
And when he said, I had approved the plan last Wednesday,
more
would that have been the 9th?
people in here
Yes.
really need to
I
work on
appreciate
this,
and
which is
support-
one of my weaknesses. But we will try different
Sorry,
approaches. And again, if
I appreciate and
you
support the need for,
value the
actions
coverage
for
and you
Superintendent
find
Bernier to
it
make adjustments to the
valuable
plan
to you,
that he
please tell a few
prepared.
friends and then tell your
Did
friends
you understand
to
the
tell a
chief
few friends
here,
and so on.
adjustments and the plan that he
Because
inherited?
That he was simply
again, if we don't have,
the
we need a
3.0 plan. I think
discussion, we
that's
need a
what
debate,
Jesus
we need
was
to debate,
So
vigorously debate
left with
the ideas so
impression
that we can get to the truth.
Like, what did you understand? Like, because we started with you explaining.
Okay,
that there were
we're
two
gonna
plans.
start with the deep dive,
What
then we'll take a break.
did you understand the chief to?
We're gonna play some piano.
set this?
I think the chief was
And then
what the plan was, and that it was based on that plan that we
We'll
had
see.
presented to the integrated.
The 3.0.
Yes.
So he appeared to suggest that there were adjustments made to the 3.0.
Yes, when what I think Superintendent Bernier was doing was tasking the planners with, give me a full, robust plan, which we eventually see is the demobilization plan that we worked off of.
So while Superintendent Bernier was asking for action on the integrated planning group plan, we
Okay.
wanted to have it.
So, in terms of the deep dive, again, we'll come back to this diagram, which will be improved for next time. Again, one of the most pressing developments is this COVID vaccine safety evidence. And so this time we'll start with the government website. So when I started tracking this in, well, I guess April 2020, it started March, April, and eventually, the government had this website. You can see the link. Well, you can't see it, but it's healthinfobase.canada.ca/COVID-19. And it would give updates on number of cases, number of deaths, number of cases. And on the news, it was always more cases, more deaths, more cases, more deaths. I think we all remember. But as a curious intellectual skeptic, I had to. I mean, I have no choice. A lot of people don't understand. My personality is a hyper-curious skeptic. And it actually is almost debilitating because I'm trying to live my life, and then I see things and I have to investigate them, right? It almost feels like I don't have a choice, which suggests I do have an obsessive-compulsive personality, which maybe I do. I've been accused of that. But again, I'm trying to take that and use it for some noble purpose. And so I basically had to look into the details. I was, very curious because all I could hear is cases, deaths, and deaths, and deaths. But I didn't know anyone who was actually being affected by this. And I didn't know anyone who was dying from the virus. So I just started looking into, well, how do they even count cases? What is a case? What's a COVID case? How are they testing? And is the test reliable and valid? I mean, this is again from science background. That's always whenever you're measuring anything empirically, you always have to wonder, well, is your measurement instrument reliable? Meaning, like, when you measure the same thing over time, do you get the same result? Reliability. And then validity is your test measuring the thing you think you're measuring? So as a quick example, in the early days of measuring temperature, they had what were called thermoscopes. I can quickly show you. So they were open-air thermoscope. Yeah, kind of like this. So you can see. You can see that it's open, right? It's actually open to the atmosphere around it. And they were called thermoscope rather than thermometer. And even though it did work in the sense of, well, when it was warmer, the reading would get higher, and when it was colder, it would be lower. But eventually what they determined, and it took many years after, is that the thermoscope measurements were being contaminated by atmospheric pressure, because meaning it could be the same temperature, but with different atmospheric pressures, you'd get a different reading. So that suggested and showed that the thermoscope is maybe reliable, but it's not valid because it's measuring more than just temperature. It's measuring a combination of temperature and atmospheric pressure. So they then improved the thermoscope by closing it to the air. And so, well, actually, if I type early thermometer, yeah, so that's an example where the mercury or whatever liquid is used is shielded from the atmospheric pressure. So therefore, it's no longer contaminated by atmospheric pressure. Okay, so that's coming back to measuring a COVID infection. You have to make sure that not only is your test reliable, but it's actually valid in measuring the thing you think you're measuring. So yeah, all these stats, the deaths, the cases. And so I started looking, and sure enough, I didn't have to look too far. I found all kinds of problems with how the various tests were being administered. So the most common one, PCR test. But again, it was just, well, this is temporary. It's going to end soon. And early on, we didn't have anything about the variants. But what I was interested in, it was like, okay, what about the different age groups? And this is for cases following vaccination. We didn't have that early days. Oh, and interestingly, like I tried to, you can try to, with the Web Archive website, you can look at what a website looked like in the past. And I need to look into that. But because it's not even showing this. So eventually, if you go under severe illness and outcomes, all the way to the bottom, they actually break it down by age and gender, because that's what I started thinking. Okay, well, the reason I'm not seeing the deaths, it's because, most of my social circle is young and healthy. So the question became, well, how deadly is the virus for young and healthy people, who are the vast majority of people? I mean, and that's just basic facts. But I was surprised to see that the main Canada COVID website, they showed you the age breakdown, but it was all the way to the bottom, and it was kind of buried. And at the time, it was showing a few deaths, but only for, like, I think starting at the 29 age group. But even then, there was many questions that came up. For example, well, how did they determine whether a death is caused by COVID only versus COVID being a secondary contributor or even tertiary? And turns out that the way they do these medical diagnoses there's a protocol to follow, and there's international codes and guidelines that the physicians are supposed to follow. But what I learned is that it's very complicated and it's very nuanced. But even then, you have to ask, well, how do they determine that, given the COVID symptoms are so nonspecific in terms of, cough, fever, these are nonspecific symptoms that you could have due to other respiratory illnesses, like even the flu. and we'll review papers showing that even medical doctors cannot reliably discriminate between COVID and other respiratory illnesses based purely on symptoms. So they need a test. So which test did they use, right? To determine the deaths. And then finally, I started thinking, well, and the blue and light blue is gender, with male and female. So then I started thinking, well, what about pre-existing conditions? So you have they would really, really pump it up in the mainstream media where, a 22-year-old died of COVID. And then you look into the details, and it turns out he had either a terminal illness or 3 other really serious medical conditions. So then I started worrying, well, we need this graph. We need this graph that shows you how many deaths from COVID depending on how many pre-existing conditions you had. So I thought, I'll just email Health Canada or Stats Canada, and we'll get the data within maybe a week. And that couldn't be further from the truth. It literally took 2-3 weeks even just to organize my request and find the right person that could find the data. And it took me 2 months to produce this graph, more than 2 months. And to me, again, this should have been front and center, like right up here. Like it should be the kind of the beyond maybe the key high level stats. It should be right up there. And it wasn't. So that was a mystery. And as we reviewed last time, when you more carefully look so you can see, for example, in the 29-year-old age bracket, indeed, the people dying, the 20-year-old dying, had 3 or more pre-existing medical conditions, or 2 additional. And again, it's not to minimize, these people died, these young people died, and it's tragic, right? But this is a very different animal compared to if 20, like if there was a green bar here, which is no other medical conditions, right? If there was 20-year-olds dying from COVID in 8 months, because again, this is March to October, so we'll say March to November 1st. Yeah, that's 8 months. Right, that'd be a much different situation than, people are already dying and then they caught COVID. But how do we know? But was COVID the primary contributor? Or was it just a secondary, tertiary thing? And because again, as I dug into these data, it was revealed, well, first of all, that 14% of the deaths are probable or possible cause of COVID without a laboratory confirmed test. And so these are not interpretable, given that a recent systemic review concluded that neither absence nor presence of signs and symptoms are accurate enough to rule out or rule in the disease. And then so those could be, technically should be ignored. And so if you remove those, right, then the deaths go down. And then among the deaths that it did involve a laboratory confirmed test, missing information make it difficult to interpret the numbers. Because, for example, for a valid PCR test result, you need to use a low enough cycle threshold value. And we can get into that. It's even more boring. You need to know the cycle threshold value to rule out false positives. Right, and we don't have that. So the government was not able to provide that. And I need to be careful when sharing emails, but I can show you the email thread if you want. I just have to hide, I guess, some of the personal government workers' email addresses maybe. But that shouldn't be that hard to do with Microsoft Paint. Oh, and then more than 80% of deaths occurred in long-term care facilities or retirement homes, which, again, is important to interpret. And now there was questions. There's a care home in Montreal where there was, the people were so frightened that they basically abandoned all these elderly people who were dying from hydration, from lack of water, which is criminal. Oh, I think it's called Héron. And now they're investigating and people should be held responsible, right? But all those deaths, there was, I think, 50 deaths in one group home in Montreal in the early days. And then finally, different provinces report comorbidities using different categories, so provincial data are not comparable to federal data. And indeed, the percentage of deaths among the healthy in the federal data is 10%, whereas it's 3 times lower in the Alberta data. So that doesn't make sense. And indeed, Stats Canada people I was interacting with, they told me about all kinds of, all kinds of problems with the data that really doesn't give you confidence in the integrity of the data, right? So, for example, they told me that some of the provinces were literally faxing faxing data to the federal government to be included in their website. So this is 2020 at the time, and we're still using fax machines in Canada. It doesn't give you much confidence. So again, this is the tip of the iceberg, but the high-level summary or the high-level conclusion is that there's a lot more nuance than just, okay, there's 50 more deaths today, 8 more deaths today, 100 more deaths tomorrow, and more deaths and more deaths. Well, again, when you want to think about locking down the entire society for something that might only be dangerous to less than a few percentages of the population, and those people matter, but the cost-benefit analyses have to be made at the level of all individuals, all age groups, whether you're healthy or not, young or old, right? So these calculations, which is what the government is now scrambling to justify, they have to justify that there was enough saved lives from COVID deaths and prevented hospitalizations due to COVID. There has to be enough benefit to justify the extreme costs, all of the costs of implementing the lockdown and the measures and the non-pharmaceutical interventions, the COVID vaccines, proof of COVID vaccination apps, the economic costs, the small business bankruptcies, all of this very dark and unprecedented psychological suffering, physical suffering from delayed surgeries, and on and on. These 3 dots mean others. So it's not meant to be comprehensive. This is just the main ones. Oh, we have some spam. That's fun. Okay, let me delete. Report. This is where again I need a young Jamie to moderate these spam messages. Okay, so I need one more. Okay, I think that's that. Okay, I need a break here, so let's maybe wrap up this part. And again, so this is again a deep dive. The truth is in the details. What are the details? And the idea here is that you can go to these links. I should test them. And basically get these numbers and verify the numbers for yourself and consider all these nuances. But at the very least, you can make a pretty solid claim that the COVID deaths data was exaggerating the severity of the virus. And again, if that's the case, well, the government would be liable to potentially even criminal charges, given that they then later made the COVID vaccine mandatory, right? I mean, it's one thing to lock down society and then debate, again, the cost versus benefits. But when they made the COVID vaccine mandatory, well, that's when it got a lot more serious, because your evidence has to be really, really good and very demonstrably justifiable that, you know, this is a virus that was very, very dangerous to everyone. Therefore, we need everyone to take the vaccine. Though even there, logically, conceptually, you don't always have to get into the details. Conceptually, vaccines, real vaccines that actually work, you do often need maybe a majority of the people to take it. But a real vaccine that's actually effective doesn't require 100% of people to take it. So that was also kind of a red flag, right? And in all the other vaccination rollouts in the history of Canada, there's never been any that were mandatory. And there were several that were highly effective. I mean, the polio vaccine, MMR, but even those ones, they're not 100%. Are they maybe not even 90%? Right? So again, that was just conceptually a very large red flag to try to resolve the mystery of why would they be that obsessed to make what appears to be an ineffective and unsafe vaccine mandatory for a virus that appears to be insufficiently dangerous to the vast majority of demographics and age groups. So returning to the graph. So this is, again, just this one one little part here. In one of the 6 crucial categories of a free and democratic society, it's bodily autonomy. And it appears to be violated based on the COVID vaccine safety and efficacy, evidence problems, and again, the next step of making it mandatory, right? And again, conceptually, even if the COVID vaccine was fully effective and fully safe, and even if the virus was dangerous to everyone, it would still be an ethical violation to make it mandatory. So, I mean, that's a pretty strong case. Okay, I need to repeat, right? Even if we were dealing with the coronavirus that was dangerous to everyone, and the COVID vaccine was fully safe and fully effective, it would still be a violation of the Nuremberg Code to require it as mandatory for your job and for participation in society. Because, again, medical ethics, it's your choice. Your doctor is supposed to inform you of the costs and benefits and the risks, all known risks, but it's up to you. And again, this is a cornerstone of medical ethics. and it just cannot be violated. Okay, let's take a break, and I'll be right back.
Acting Deputy Chief Ferguson,
Could
you were...
just introduce yourself,
I
please, for the
apologize.
record?
Yes, Rebecca Jones for former Chief Slowly.
Thank you.
Acting Deputy Chief Ferguson, you were the MIC for the Freedom Convoy, right?
That's right.
And as MIC, you had overall responsibility for the OPS's planning and response to the protests.
Yes.
And your testimony is that you weren't reading the Hendon reports, though you knew that they existed, right?
As of the 28th of January, when I think I was forwarded one.
Right, okay. And your role, though you were the MIC with the overall responsibility, you were working with Deputy Chief Bell, who had overall responsibility for intelligence, right?
Yes, yep.
And I take it you were relying on the intelligence team to provide you with the information you needed from the intelligence report to input into your plans.
I think my team was, yes, I wasn't writing the plans, but yes.
You yourself weren't writing the plans?
No.
Okay. And you weren't writing the plans directly, and you weren't reading the intelligence reports directly. You were at a higher strategic level.
That's right.
Okay. And similarly, there would be no expectation that the chief of police would be pouring through the Hendon reports and trying to reconcile the different pieces of intelligence, right?
No, I don't think that would be realistic.
Okay. And the chief of police would be at an even higher level, relying on his team for operations and intelligence.
Yes.
Okay. And one of the things that you noted was that you did not believe that the initial plan, the January 29th plan, was intelligence-led. And I just want to suggest to you that Chief Slowly's expectation for his command had been from when he entered as chief that all operational plans were to be intelligence-led.
Yes.
Okay. Now, for this initial January 29th plan, I take it that Chief Slowly's involvement in the process is as you would have expected.
Yes.
Okay. So he did not direct the planning unduly,
Not at this point.
didn't interfere. And in fact, Chief Slowly did not even see the plan or draft of the plan until the morning of January 28th when it was provided to him for the first time, right?
That's possible.
Okay. And he said, looks fine to him, and the team proceeded with their plan.
That's right.
And he would have been when looking at that plan, he would have been considering the intelligence and operational details that had been provided to him by his senior command team.
I think that's fair, yes.
Now, if we pivot forward a few days to Sunday night, January 30th, at that point, your evidence is that it became clear to the OPS that the people were not going to leave, and that there needed to be a pivot in the plan.
Yes. Pivot in our response.
Pivot in your response. Okay, fair enough. And you, as the MIC, were responsible in that pivot, right?
Yes.
And that required evolutions say a new plan. I'll go back to what we have spoken about, an evolution of the plan. He had not seen an evolved version of this plan, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, we're back.
What he was looking for here
Hopefully you
was
enjoyed that
specifically a public
sneak
order
preview
plan, not-
of some
not the-
soothing
Okay.
classical music, some Jan Tiersen to be specific.
Plan, right? There would be public order component of
So Jan
the
Tiersen
plan,
is
try to figure out
Belgium.
how we're going to resolve the situation with the people.
Oh,
who are
sorry, I
occupying the
misspoke.
city.
Ludovico
plan, there would be a
Einaudi.
plan, there would be a traffic plan, there would be
That is what I was
installations
playing.
plan.
But I will be playing Jan Tiersen
He was
as
focusing
well.
solely on this one.
And this helps nourish my own soul. So
Is
it's
a bit loaded. So he was
let's
interested.
turn this down a bit. It's important to mention that I need to stay positive. Because again, I'm sticking my neck out quite high and taking a lot of risks, professional, financial, legal risks in doing this, and especially in the beginning when you don't have many viewers. And I need to stay positive. And but again, with this new organization and joining forces with other independent journalists and our European correspondents, I mean, there's a lot coming, a lot in the pipe. Okay, this is too boring. We're just gonna pause this. So let's update this. So we've gone into our first deep dive, and so now we're gonna do some spontaneous commentary. I guess I can leave the Emergencies Act Inquiry live stream playing when I'm going through. So in this segment, I'll literally be going through Twitter, newsfeed, Reddit, Telegram, feeds that I'm following, where again I've curated the diverse perspectives. So again, this is very messy. It's very difficult. It's very challenging because there's so much garbage. There's so much misinformation and fake news and just Photoshop memes and even deepfake videos. So we'll talk more about that. So you have to be very careful, especially for politicians or elected officials who have enormous amounts of video footage where they're speaking. You can actually fairly easily, apparently, create what's called deepfakes. So the deepfake is a video. It's like a photoshopping a video frame by frame, where the politician is, and there's lots for Trump or Obama, even Trudeau, where it looks like, oh, he's actually saying something really crazy. And so again, if something sounds really crazy, then it's most likely fake. And again, you have to verify your sources and find a friend who's expert in deepfakes and video editing, right? And again, that's the kind of the journalistic spirit, the scientific spirit. It's, you know, you can't know everything, you can't be expert at everything, but you can find a friend, find a professional, find someone who knows someone, and get to the bottom and ask good questions. The Socratic method, logic and reason, avoiding logical fallacies. Again, vigorous collision of ideas from other smart, careful people who are coming at it from different perspectives. And but of course, things are getting so strange that it's getting harder and harder to say, like, this seems fake, but it also seems like it could be true. And as we know, the truth can be stranger than fiction, right? I think that was Lord Byron, but also Mark Twain. It's really strange. Mark Twain, truth is stranger than fiction, but it is because fiction is obliged to stick to possibilities. Truth isn't. Here's the Lord Byron. 'Tis strange but true, for truth is always strange, stranger than fiction. So, but yeah, the one off the top that I promised we would do is this high school teacher, a transgendered high school teacher who is dressing extremely inappropriately, but somehow the school board is not intervening. And so, transgendered, and this story is strange, so strange in so many ways. High school shop teacher. I'll try to find the actual viral video that first transpired. Where is it? Okay, well, this one looks... Okay, first of all, how can this be a high school teacher shop teacher? As you can see, I don't know if we can... So, he or she seems to be really struggling with how to use this saw. And it's a pretty simple saw. I mean, I guess the breasts might be in the way. You gotta make sure you're not cutting the wrong thing here. But seriously, right? When I first saw that, I just automatically assumed that this can't be true, right? And so, who's this person? And one interesting thing is that we have the person's name. This is some kind of Kyla Lemieux, Miss Lemieux. But how come no one's interviewing them, right? And how come no one's interviewing the school board, which is the Halton District School Board? Because again, this would clearly be a violation of the dress code. Every school, every university has a dress code. So why are they not investigating? The response seems to be, well, because he's transgendered, it's protected, and it's even mentioned here, it's protected under the Ontario Rights Code. Yeah, so gender identity and gender expression are protected grounds under the Ontario Human Rights Code, which is actually what Jordan Peterson was protesting back in 2015. So the one narrative is that the school board is afraid to enforce the dress code because then they would get sued. But it turns out, but another possibility is that apparently the teacher was pushing back against toxic masculinity accusations and is doing this as a troll. So he's trolling the school board. Because he knows he can get away with it. But either way, that's pretty ballsy things to do, pardon my French. Right? Are you that obsessed that you're going to dress like that? So it's just, again, very strange. And then there's protests happening outside the school. And again, there's just all these weird people showing up, including like a white supremacist, a lone wolf white supremacist, super sketchy. So one possibility is that beyond just dividing people, because again, you have half society seemingly saying, well, this is okay, transgendered people need to be included in society, we should not judge them, and so whatever they do is fine. And then you have the other half of society who's just saying this is completely ludicrous and it's unsafe environment for students. So it clearly is dividing society, but it could be worse than that, where like whoever's orchestrating this, they are trying to not just divide society, but they're trying to link the people who want to defend just common sense. They want to link those people to these right-wing extremist groups. I don't know if I can find it, but there was a lone person. Oh, I think it's Rebel News. Trafalgar. There was a person showing up with kind of an like against gays, and then on the other side it was National Justice Party, and if you go to it, it was clearly it seemed like a fake, white supremacy event. Because keep in mind, we have all these hate speech laws coming through the pipe. So those are the reality. And so if you want to justify hate speech laws, when we already have, first of all, to clarify, Canada already has much stronger hate speech laws compared to the US. And so do we really need stronger hate speech laws? So if you want to pass more hate speech laws and more aggressive hate speech laws, it would make sense that you need to create situations where people are going to be hateful. But is it wrong to be hateful against someone who's endangering potentially students? And children are innocent, and we need to make sure they go to school in an environment that's conducive to learning. Okay, so here's that footage I was talking about. The internet seems to be slowing down.
So, like, the first day I walked into school, I almost bumped into her. I ain't gonna lie. Like, I tried to juke her up. She would not. I could not get past that, bro. Because I could not let that slide.
I'm a mother of two, grandmother of three, retired teacher of 28 years, and I'm not having it anymore.
I'm here today to stand for our children. It seems like our government has failed us, and they would rather protect perverts instead of our impressionable children.
They're all confused. They're being taught what to think, not how
Okay.
to think. That's not what education is supposed to be.
So, Alexa Benitez, I'm currently in Oakville, in front of Trafalgar
So if
High
you
School, and
The grandfather, this country is not the country I grew up in.
Two, grandmother of three, retired teacher of 28 years, and
okay, here you go. So again, people are having peaceful protests. That's great. People are debating the issues, but then all of a sudden, this person
one more person helps alert
shows
the
up,
country
a lone
to
wolf.
this. I'm just an ordinary person who's had enough.
Well, I'm here today because I'm JD Meany and I'm running for regional council here in Oakville. Regional council position. I'm of OSAP, nothing to do with being trans.
That they're endangering people out here now is just autogender and such, and it's sort of
I'm here to protect perverts.
Okay, so then all of a sudden, this person fags out, right? So he's expressing his opinion that he's, I guess, against homosexuals, which, again, this is transgendered individuals. So right away, it's a bit suspicious that someone who's expressing their opinion that they dislike homosexuals is showing up at a protest about a transgendered school teacher dressing inappropriately. But look at what's on the other side.
So now you can see just behind me I have someone with a board writing out. So as you can see at the other protest to live, the one we keep.
Okay, and look.
This guy.
NationalJusticeParty.com. So if you go to national, again, it's like, well, who? NationalJusticeParty.com. And there you go. The moral case for white nationalism. The moral case for white nationalism. And if you click on that, this is Mike Penovich, and he's a real person, but very shady. And this was September 3rd, and he sounds like an actor. I'm sorry, but like, just whoa. And again, this looks sketchy. The way the video, the way the audience looks, look at that. Okay? I'm not a video editing expert, but look at that.
All right, thank you. Thank you all for being here after 2 years of the NJP, our 8th meeting, and this is our biggest one yet. Thank you all. This is amazing. This is an amazing crowd. Over 400 people are in this room right now.
Okay, so and we don't need to get into the details of this, but think about, again, where is this coming from? You know, you have a divisive situation, divisive issue, and then this, and again, everyone's free to express their opinions. But why would this person who's, and this is an American, this is an American white supremacy group, whether it's real or not, it's Americans. So you have to ask, why would someone like show up and be promoting some American white supremacist group, right? But of course, one possibility is that Trudeau is linking the Freedom Convoy to these extremist groups, right? With, of course, the white supremacist, the Nazi flag on the first day, the Saturday of the Freedom Convoy protest. And he's even specifically mentioned how American right-wing extremism is filtering down into Canada. And he mentioned that even with like the whole self-defense, and how in Canadian culture, guns are for hunting and shooting practice only. That Canadians don't have a constitutionally protected right to defend themselves using a gun. That's only coming through the American right-wing extremists, right? So again, we need to ask questions. Who is this person? Why were they there? And because it's just too strange to and again, very, very, like, think about being that person. Would you, like, who really has the kahunas to show up alone with that kind of inflammatory sign that links to a website of a white supremacist group? Come on. This is highly suspicious and needs to be investigated. And we're going to track the story, but we're not going to do investigative journalism on this one because we don't have the resources. But that's the one story in terms of spontaneous commentary. And let's go find some other ones. I guess we could just go to Twitter. And maybe I'll put this back. while I find. Oh, there's a break.
Yeah, you kind of had a sense of his plan.
Yeah, his plan. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
How can we do a little bit of? Okay, listen. I want to be Fran Trisha Ferguson, and if you be so kind as to be Henry O.
Frank O.
Frank O.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you ask me a question.
So we talk about the plan. So give me specific. What intelligence you have for plan?
The plan is to create a plan for the plan.
Okay, this is not that constructive.
You say the plan.
Again, they're trying to lighten.
Convoy. You say crush them. You say crush convoy. That's the plan. Hail Hydra.
Hail Hydra.
That is the plan.
The plan.
That's a plan.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, so that may or may not be funny. So this is the independent journalist.
So anyways, I think according to math and logic, very early we knew in Canada, at least our government did, to have way more than 2 doses, because they ordered 10 doses for every human, not just every adult or every elderly. This is 400 million in a population of 38 million, for every man, woman, and child. So I'm not saying this means too much. It just means Canada, at the very early, knew it wasn't going to be 2 doses. It couldn't have been 2 doses. Why secure 5 times that amount?
But they actually stated at the time the cost they were putting into it. So we're buying in several hundred million doses at the cost of, and it was a phenomenal amount. And I thought, wow.
Well, we're also building the capacity in Quebec to do 100 million more.
Yeah, this is another mystery.
Yeah, here we go.
Can we hear?
We're building facilities in Quebec to add 100 million more doses, so that's 3 more doses per person. That's in addition to the 400 million we ordered in 2001. We're planning to dose for a long, long time. I can tell you that in Canada.
Trying to be the world record holder for dosing people up. I mean,
yeah, look at that. The pre-order, we pre-ordered enough to cover the states. Like America is 350 million. We ordered enough to cover them, and they're 10 times their size. Yeah, look at these developing countries, by the way.
Okay, I cleared. I refreshed the chat, and now all the chats are gone.
And even to this day, even to this day, they're not pulling back on this narrative. They're not stopping the development of this facility. They're moving ahead with this. It's not slowing down.
strange bit is various countries have got different methods at the moment and how they're pushing it. Israel has still been pushing it quite hard for people to stay in the month of getting dosed up.
So yes, this is another mystery. They're discussing why did they order that many doses when, again, it didn't seem medically justified.
Women, they didn't limit it. They limited to, I think, under 12 for women. But males, no males under 40 should get the mRNA one, is what their recommendation is.
Denmark, wasn't it, a few weeks ago?
Denmark, yeah.
They said exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Brilliant. But when you see stories like that, you think, well, we're changing, it's all starting to crumble. But then when you see a story involving Marvel being paid by Pfizer to actually produce a comic where your Avengers get vaccinated, and you're telling your young readers they have to be vaccinated to be part of the good guys. You have to be safe and looking after the health of everyone. then surely that's not the best interest. I mean, I put that on Getter yesterday, maybe, or the day before, and it's quite incredible. It really is. When you look at the artwork they've done for it.
Yeah, it is. And it's interesting to bring up Denmark because, again, given my collaborators and contacts around the world, I can regularly message these correspondents and former collaborators and ask them to corroborate some of these claims that, for example, several European countries were halted the COVID vaccine rollout, or at least restricted the COVID vaccine rollout to specific age groups and specific medical conditions, whereas Canada and other places, they were just saying, no, everyone needs to be COVID vaccinated. And that didn't make sense. And again, if that's actually happening, that's just further evidence to doubt whether you should take it personally, which again, the Canadian government is not respecting at all. Right? So again, it'd be a very different situation if we were dealing with a much more dangerous virus that affected all age groups and all health status groups. Though even then, as I already said earlier, it would still be questionable, highly questionable, to mandate it, to make it mandatory. And indeed, this has never happened in Canadian history or even Western democracy. For viruses that are more serious, though even polio is polio virus more dangerous, more serious than the coronavirus? My hunch would be yes. So assuming that's true, then it would be even more curious, because they didn't make the polio vaccine mandatory. So back to some spontaneous commentary. So just scrolling through Twitter, and we have Yakmeet claims that Yakmeet Singh is spewing hate speech. So maybe we can tune into that. And provide some commentary.
Does no one any can't reject that because it does no one any help. The reality is our Canada is a place of racism, of violence, of genocide of Indigenous people, and our Canada is a place where Muslims aren't safe. They aren't in unmarked graves. Our Canada is a place where you can't walk down the streets if you wear a hijab because you will be killed. This is our Canada.
Really?
We can't deny it. We can't reject that because it does no one any help. The reality is our Canada is a place of racism, of violence, of genocide of Indigenous people, and our Canada is
Isn't
a
it
place where Muslims aren't safe.
repeating himself?
They aren't safe. Muslims are not safe in this country. And Muslims wonder. I've spoken to people. They wonder how can't reject.
Oh dear. I need some fact checkers working overtime here. And what are his motives? With my wife being Indonesian and Indonesia being primarily Muslim, that one can be rejected very easily. That Muslim are a lot safer in Canada than in most other countries where Muslims are the majority or minority. And in fact, it's the Christians in predominantly Muslim countries that are in danger. But again, to be careful, we want to be careful. This is a 49-second clip. So this is maybe a more general teaching moment is you want to the broader concept, because it is true you can basically just extract 50-second of a 5-minute speech and extract the worst part of it, and so you'd want to find this longer clip and give it a proper context. But this is definitely sounds just completely unfounded, and the fact that Jagmeet Singh is in this coalition with the Liberal Party, to me, is highly questionable. Because and again, the NDP. So I guess just to iterate that Jagmeet Singh is. He's got his phone number. There you go. We could call him. The NDP is supposed to represent the marginalized, the everyday person who doesn't have a voice, minorities, and anyone else that have grievances, right? So why are you picking and choosing and saying really divisive things that don't seem supported by the facts? But let's find something else more interesting.
It doesn't take much to bottleneck and control the large capital finance market. It's not like a convenience store where there's 50 million different types of options. There's only a small group of super rich that fund this market, and through the ESG score, they can control corporations top down. And because of the mandate is to add wokeness, that's exactly what you get. So HR is hiring people that are more agreeable, and that's kind of how they're infiltrating all of the different.
See, this is what I was talking about, the radical woke ideology.
They're infiltrating the corporations. I guarantee you, at the end of the day, a lot of these CEOs and stuff would rather not deal with this. Doesn't help the bottom line. You go woke, you go broke, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But also at the end of the day, if their banks and their capital access is being choked, they're going to have to they're going to have to play along in order to survive versus completely bankrupting and taking employees down with it. It's brilliant. I think it's brilliant on how they implemented it because they don't have any pushback. Tesla's the only one that's kind of pushing back because they got such a bad score, and that's because Elon doesn't comply. Here we go. They got a back medium
risk.
Tesla, battery companies, solar, electric cars, they're medium. They're medium risk because they're not compliant. They probably have a very low governance score because they're not compliant. At least not compliant with the mandate or the agenda. So that's why I asked you, is there something else behind it? Because we see all of these little webs and these little threads being put in place, like ESG scores, and we have Schwab, who openly, this video of him claiming to own half of our cabinet, and it's not wrong. He does. For some reason in Canada, we don't mind. At least a good chunk of us don't mind. But I think the vaccine injury, and I think mandates in general.
It's cutting it. Okay, let's actually just we'll go through the stream. So I mean, I'm still tinkering with the method here. So here's a CP24. So this is government subsidized media saying most grade 6 students are failing to meet provincial math standards. Which, I mean, it's already going downhill. But most, I'd want to see a chart of that over time. But of course, the pandemic and the lockdowns contributed to that big time. I mean, and there's even studies showing that online learning or remote learning is way less effective than in-class learning. And therefore, it's part of this cost and benefit analysis again. This would be a huge cost. Delays in education. And again, these are formative years. Actually, yeah, it's not even on the list. So impairments in education, in your formative years, but your social development, that's where you form social bonds and develop social self-esteem and communication skills, how to make friends, right? These are huge costs that need to be factored in. And again, this is CP24. It's not a right-wing extremist group. This person is just commenting, well, let's go ahead and have a strike, more teachers strike. So again, the kids will be all right, but and kids are very resilient, but there still are limits to the resilience of children. And but again, that gets so dark. Most people, I think, it's hard for them to fathom like the government could have let down the children that badly. Vaccine injury from the H1N1 vaccine 2009. Yeah, that's another one that could be compared. Because again, when you're trying to make sense of things, you have to compare. And that's why when we looked at this graph, so this again, this is showing that the COVID vaccines have about 10 times more serious side effects than all previous vaccines in Ontario and Canada. But remember that I also compared how the COVID vaccines serious side effects compared to even the worst. So the meningitis vaccine, and this is rotavirus vaccine. And so this, again, this is 20 serious, like basically 20 hospitalizations following vaccines compared to 3 to 5. So you could say that they're about 3 to 4 times more dangerous. So that's AstraZeneca and Moderna. Let's see. Oh, this is what? OPP says convoy was labeled a potential national security threat in part because of the threat to Canada's reputation by virtue of coverage in the international media of what was transpiring in Canada. What? That sounds...
Go to page 4. I want to take you to the next day's Hendron report, February 8th, which is OPP 401624. And we'll go to page 4 when we get there, under the assessment section. So the situation in Ottawa remains volatile and represents a public safety threat and an officer safety threat. And then the last sentence in that paragraph, as such, the ongoing series of protests and blockades represents a potential threat to Canada's sovereignty and national security. Is that, can you sort of compare for us the language from the February 7th report to the one here on February 8th?
I think in essence it means the same thing, that we have a potential concern in terms of sovereignty in our border crossings and our economic integrity in terms of trade and national security in that regard. It might also have to do with the analytical assessments of threat to reputation by virtue of coverage in the international media of what was transpiring in Canada.
Wow, that doesn't make any sense. And if anything, it was almost arguably the opposite. I had European correspondents telling me, wow, we're really inspired by what's going on in Canada. And people are finally coordinating and trying to send a signal to their governments that they've crossed the line and in terms of government overreach, right? So where's the other perspectives? And again, potential national security, potential violence. But it's, and of course you have to consider how a situation could change in terms of intelligence gathering. But there's still a difference between a chance, a strong potential for violence and national security issues to arise versus actually arising. Where's the evidence of a national security threat? There is none. Where is the evidence that there was violent protesters? There is none. Where is the evidence, credible evidence, that there were weapons, bombs, arson? There is none, right? But with the twisting of language, you can make it sound like there was some. If you make up new words like social violence, community violence, social trauma, activations. What was the other one? Anyways. So that's, whoops. We'll go back here. Here. Community violence, social trauma, activations. Oh, microaggressions. Yeah, microaggressions. Okay, we're gonna wrap things up. Oh, fan mail. We need to get to our fan mail. Looks like not. This is good. Looks like none of Trudeau's conspiracy theories about the convoy are panning out. CSIS found no foreign actors funding the convoy protests, according to public inquiry evidence. Though again, it'd be better to have a link. So this is a quick side note. If you're gonna make that claim, and this is just a picture, okay, it's got the Globe and Mail. Why not add a link? Sometimes you don't have room. See, but now I have to go over here, type CSIS found no, and then I have to go see, okay, is this true? Right? Because that's just, anyone can Photoshop a headline with a newspaper logo. Okay, though I typed it in and there you go. It looks, whoops, what did I do? It looks legit. So, though it's paywalled. So again, the Globe and Mail is such a prestigious newspaper. Can't afford to just give me a little bit for free. So that's not very useful. So, but again, to reiterate, you had room to link to the story. So why not link to the story? Ugh, and then more Twitter, Elon Musk, distraction. And again, this is me saying this for someone who used to be a big Elon Musk fan. I used to have Elon Musk quotations on my office walls, okay? And he is inspiring in many ways in terms of being a very smart, he has physics background, rocket science background, and he's a businessman and has all these impressive achievements beyond just his net worth. But over time, I got suspicious because he was always in the news, always doing interviews, always saying this and that, like on the big ticket items, right? We're talking about electric cars, and then his Starlink low orbit satellite company, which is really big deal. And he seems to be the good guy, but he also seems to be dividing everyone and distracting everyone. So again, and also not just distracting, manipulating. So I have grievances. And he has been caught and investigated for insider trading, so I have to be careful. I don't think he's ever been charged, but it just seems to be over aggressively using Twitter there was instances where he was even asking his Twitter followers, should I buy more or less Tesla stock? And he was even telling people that Tesla stock is too high, right? I mean, come on, to me, if that's not a violation of the Securities Exchange Commission, then the standards are too low. Because, I'm sorry, but when you have someone with millions of followers with that much power, I guess he has free expression. So it is a tough call, right? I mean, Elon Musk, even if he's one of the wealthiest person in the world, so it's a human right for him to have freedom of expression. But with power comes responsibility. And if your tweets are going to change a stock's price by that much, do you just deserve extra scrutiny? So my position is with power comes great responsibility, and you deserve to be scrutinized more and be held accountable more because you have that much power over others, just like the police. The police has literally so much power over other individuals' lives, and they have weapons that they can use correctly or they can abuse their power. And so that's why they need to be extra scrutinized with increased transparency to make sure they're not abusing their power. And that's why I fully support body cams, where police need to film any interaction with civilians. And it varies in the state as well, in the United States. It's varying, but there's generally been a push towards requiring body cams, though I forget exactly what the laws are in Canada, but I would push to strengthen those requirements because it's the only way for the public to know. And of course, you should be filming your interactions with the police, but it's better that there's at least one official record, and then you can triangulate with your own videos. Okay, a few more. Farming needs to stop. Oh, there's no audio.
Farming needs to stop. That's the single biggest driver of climate change. Farming needs to stop. That's the single biggest driver of climate change. Farming needs to stop. That's
okay. How are you gonna eat? Oh, and I was even thinking I can play my own footage of attending the Freedom Convoy to show. I mean, it's not going to be that unique, but like these. Does this seem like a dangerous occupation? Oh, there I am, right there. No. Okay. So, we'll close this. Well, we can. Oh, they're on their lunch break. I guess I should. Well, we'll know when it returns. Okay, so the fan mail is partly a joke, partly serious. But when I send out emails and text messages announcing my Saving Democracy initiative, I sent it to a diverse group of people, including people who are maybe on the other side of the political divide. Because again, that's how we get to the truth. And it can be awkward, but you need to make sure you're having conversations and debates with people from sufficiently diverse political and intellectual perspectives. So I, even at the risk of being attacked, I, still invited people who are on, I guess you could call it left-leaning mainstreamist positions. And I got this one funny reply. I'm not going to mention his name, but I will read it Did I put this? No, I'm just gonna read it. So again, this is a response to my message of, okay, please tune in Tuesday, Thursday mornings. I got this new project, and the goal is to strengthen democracy through long-form analysis, debates, and investigative watchdog journalism. And his response was, I'm effing drowning at the moment psychologically, but I'm intrigued nonetheless. I didn't want to leave you hanging, but it's going to be a few more days before I can even contemplate exposure to your special brand of savant madness. I like that. Savant madness. Whether it seems like it or not, most of the times of late that I've talked to you, I walk away feeling quite discombobulated. Bonus points for the word discombobulated, which means confused and kind of uncertain. Sorry if that's too cryptic. I'm reasonably drunk. Seriously, though, it's on my list, and I hope you're well. And then he has a PS. It's also interesting. I'm not really a fan of true, pure democracy. I don't feel good about my autonomy being regulated by a mass of ill-informed half-wits. See the United States of America. I hope you feel the same, but if not, let the sparks fly. Yes, right? Again, this is what we need. Let the sparks fly. Let the collision of the ideas happen. And when I got this email, I immediately thought, let's try to organize a debate where we'd have two people on the mainstreamist, left-leaning position, and then two people who are more on the side of being COVID skeptical and more on the side of just individual human rights, whether you call that conservative or classical liberal is my preferred term. And so I could invite him and another friend who I'm still in contact with. And as the person says, let the sparks fly. We can try to figure things out. But in terms of his statement, I don't feel good about my autonomy being regulated by a mass of ill-informed half-wits and not being a fan of true democracy. I'm really not following, because to me it's the opposite. The United States is being ruled by Biden, a very left-leaning leader who is supporting all this COVID restrictions and COVID boosters. So is he talking about Biden being ill-informed half-wits? I think, but again, this is where we need to clarify and have a discussion. But my sense is that he's alluding to the fact that these freedom convoy misfits and delinquents are the one he's talking about. But again, how do you know? How can you trust the people in power are not wrong, right? The people in power are humans. They are fallible. And they have a lot of power that they can abuse, right? And if our democracy is not strong enough, then they will abuse those powers. Because, as the saying goes, power corrupts absolutely. And so my claim is let's investigate through these basic categories, the most fundamental democratic categories that makes life enjoyable. Let's investigate to what extent our democracy is actually healthy and strong and resilient in allowing people to freely enjoy their life without harming others. And speak truth to power. Right? So that's the rub. And I don't feel good about my autonomy being regulated by a massive ill-informed half-wits. But I'm the same. I don't feel good about people in power that seem incompetent and have huge conflicts of interest, financial, professional, career, narcissistic, egoistic conflict of interest. I don't feel comfortable, especially given their track record and the other track records of all kinds of horrible atrocities committed by governments against their own citizens. I also don't feel comfortable with my autonomy being regulated by massive ill-informed half-wits. But it appears that we believe different groups of people are those, and there's different groups of people who are deemed enemies. And how can we square that? Because he's a colleague from grad school and was probably one of my smartest friends, who at the time he was considered more conservative than me. So that's fan mail. Beyond other fan mail we could bring up in terms of being accused of being a conspiracy theorist by some of my own family members, though she's I guess my first cousin's wife, so she's not blood related. But again, that's quite unsettling to try to be careful and say, I've examined these issues extensively and I have some concerns, and they're growing, and these are corroborated by the concerns of hundreds and thousands of other independent medical doctors and scientists who don't lack conflict of interest. And her response is, don't rope me into these conspiracy theory craziness. And it's like, what? Like, where is that coming from? And why are you so afraid to engage the issues? So if you're watching or if you're hearing about this, again, you'd be more than welcome to have a discussion, a civil conversation, to try to get to the bottom of these fundamental issues. Okay, let's start wrapping up. Oh, actually, we have all these questions. Whoops, let's go through these. Well, they're kind of, we don't actually have to go through all of them, because some of these are planted questions, full disclosure. And maybe I'll just give some sneak previews of, well, one of them is just related to what I was talking about. Isn't being a conspiracy theorist a bad thing? Well, what do you think? Let's see what Wikipedia's definition of a conspiracy theorist. And again, was Trudeau a conspiracy theorist in making allegations that the Freedom Convoy are plotting against the government? Have those come true? Okay, so this is interesting. A conspiracy theory is an explanation for an event that invokes a conspiracy by sinister and powerful groups when other explanations are more probable. So, this is pretty decent. And you can look at, the citations for this definition. But again, as I was just reviewing, we know factually that powerful elected officials have repeatedly abused their power in the past, especially in coordination with mega corporations like pharmaceutical companies and other companies who sell products that harm people, like tobacco companies, alcohol companies. So again, there's a reasonable expectation that you should be skeptical. And indeed, I argue it's your civic duty to be skeptical in scrutinizing the government's action. But it is true, you have to be careful. You can't just assume everything is, and you can't just assume that anything the government is doing is to harm you and to secretly make your life miserable. You do have to compare it to other possible explanations that are more probable. And it is true that on the surface, it does sound pretty crazy that Canada and all these other Western democracies could somehow be pursuing the interests of these extra-national entities, whether it's the Chinese Communist Party or the World Economic Forum, and these other entities, it does seem on the surface unlikely, right? But how likely is that compared to other possibilities like government incompetence, or even just, careerism, right? So politicians, they generally want to stay in power because they want a paycheck, and they generally love attention, or they have narcissism addiction. And again, that's why we need to carefully examine these authoritarian flavored events in terms of the most fundamental categories. And again, do deep dives, deep and wide. We need depth and breadth, and then interpret those events in the broader geopolitical context, which is that these seem to be happening in virtually all other Western democracies, which seem to rule out the theories about government incompetence, or just regular corruption, just good old political corruption by corporations and lobby groups that are trying to change the law to serve their own profit motives, right? And my position, though again, I don't want this to be true, I want this to be false, but it seems like the most justifiable position is that these developments are going way beyond these more mundane explanations that we've generally only had the need to consider in the past. That was a mouthful, but hopefully that makes sense. And I would say that the campaign to label anyone asking too many questions a conspiracy theorist, that's so aggressive that it's starting to move towards just general gaslighting, which is making you feel bad for having reasonable emotions, and starts encroaching into freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, right? Because if all of a sudden, you have these private thoughts of, maybe the COVID vaccines is not safe, but then you immediately think, ooh, but I don't want to be conspiracy theorist, so I better not entertain that thought. Okay, so never mind that thought. COVID vaccines are safe. Yeah, I don't want to be conspiracy theorist, right? That's a problem, because again, remember, freedom of thought, belief, opinion, conscience. That's a very fundamental protected category that again is required to keep the government accountable, right? Because if we can't think our own thoughts, and the government wants everyone to have the same thoughts, well, then they can get away with much worse things. And so I joke around that you should be proud to be a conspiracy theorist, because it's just another way of like critical thinking. Though I guess to be fair, and maybe we can end it here. To be fair, because now it's almost like we have the hardcore conspiracy theorists, and then the more modern conspiracy theorists who are questioning COVID, right? So I still say that, like if you believe in the flat Earth conspiracy theory, for example, right? Then again, the truth is in the details, but there are actual conspiracy theorists who believe the wildest things that can be more parsimoniously explained by more probable explanations. Right? But to determine this, that's what I'm saying. Like, to determine whether your theory is conspiratorial or not, you have to entertain all possibilities and then rule out the ones that are really unlikely, and then retain the ones that seem more likely compared to the other ones. And that's just independent thinking, critical thinking, careful thinking. Involves conspiracy theories, and we know now that many theories that were considered conspiracy theories, do come true later.
Order and load.
Oh, okay. What would be one example? Well, I mean, the Area 51, we could look into that, where there were claims that the government, the U.S. government, was hiding evidence of extraterrestrial life, and so that was considered a conspiracy theory. And then now later, many years later, the government and the FBI or the military did release information on possible extra UFOs that to me are still insufficient, but it was still correct that the U.S. government was hiding evidence of UFOs, right? Even though I think that evidence is still insufficient, they were hiding it for whatever reason. Okay, well, thanks for tuning in, and I guess as a sneak preview for next time, we will be continuing on our deep dives into these authoritarian flavor developments in each of these 6 fundamental categories, more spontaneous commentary on other current events, including the Emergency Act inquiry, and we'll continue on these questions. So, for example, if the Emergency Act inquiry concludes the Emergency Act was unjustified, like what happens? What could happen? Would the elected officials get in trouble finally? Would they be forced to resign? Would there be another investigation? So we can think about these different scenarios of what will happen in 2 months in terms of if it's concluded it was justified versus unjustified, or other way around. And again, thanks for tuning in. And if you value our reporting, please tell a few friends to tell a few of their friends so that we can grow the viewership, so that we can have more questions and more interactions to get to the bottom of this. Because I have special skills and strengths, but I'm still only one fallible human being. And the best way to the truth is, again, to have vigorous debates with careful, smart people from diverse perspectives. See you next time. Bye-bye.